This lesson focuses on one of the most popular theories of social psychology, social influence. Upon completing this lesson, you should be able to define social influence and determine what distinguishes it from persuasion, describe the three major categories of social influence, define the foot in the door technique and provide an example, describe the findings of Milgram's series of obedience experiments, and describe Ash's classic conformity experiment. So what is social influence? The comparatively young science of social influence can trace its roots to the Second World War, when a social psychologist named Carl Hovland was contracted by the U.S. Armed Forces to bolster the morale of soldiers. President Roosevelt was concerned that Americans would lose the will to fight after winning victory in Europe. It was Hovland's job to motivate soldiers to continue fighting against Japan. Since World War II, social influence has become a vastly expanding field of study, devoted to discovering the principles that determine our beliefs, create our attitudes, and move us to action. Social influence is a change in overt behavior caused by real or imagined pressure from others. It involves the exercise of social power by a person or group to change the attitudes or behavior of others in a particular direction. Social power refers to the force available to the influencer to motivate this change. For example, as a teenager, your mother tells you don't ride in the car with someone who's been drinking. It's Friday night, you're out with your friends, and they ask you to get into a car with someone who's been drinking. You reply no because of your mother's advice. However, they assure you the senior driving only had 3 beers and the party is only 4 blocks away. They also assure you you will be safe. You start to think that maybe mom's overreacting. 3 beers doesn't mean drunk, and after all, he doesn't look drunk, so you hop in the car. Social influence occurs in this example because other people had an effect on behavior. Social influence is similar to peer pressure in that its effects on you come from other people, and it may alter your decisions. Social influence can have positive or negative effects on people. Not all social influence is negative, and not all peer pressure is negative. Social influence, in short, is the effect of the way you think and act as a result of various associations in society. There are 3 categories of social influence: conformity, compliance, and obedience. Conformity is changing one's behavior to match the responses or actions of others. No pressure is necessary. Conformity is yielding to perceived group pressure. Situational factors that influence conformity are group size, cohesiveness, and social support. In terms of group size, conformity is near its peak when 3 to 4 members agree, with no further increase in effect up to 15. Cohesive groups engender more conformity than non-cohesive groups. When the topic is of high relevance to the group, the social pressure brought to bear on the deviant is higher than when the topic is of low relevance. In terms of social support, when the majority is not unanimous, conformity drops dramatically. Compliance is changing one's behavior in response to a direct request or publicly acting in accord with a direct request, whether or not one privately agrees with the request. 3 factors that foster compliance are positive moods, reciprocity, and giving reasons. People are more likely to comply when they're in a good mood, especially if the request is pro-social in nature. The norm of reciprocity states that people should return a favor or a good deed, and is a powerful influence across cultures. Giving reasons, regardless of the merit of the reasons, appears to generate mindless compliance. Obedience is changing one's behavior in response to a directive from an authority figure. The performance of an action is in response to a direct order. Here's a table showing our most common influencers. As you can see, we're influenced by a number of people and things, such as peers, family, friends, music, movies, etc. Most of the time, we are being influenced without even knowing through a process described as unconscious integration of external stimuli. According to Perloff, persuasion can be defined as a symbolic process in which communicators try to convince other people to change their attitudes or behaviors regarding an issue through the transmission of a message in an atmosphere of free choice. The key elements of this definition of persuasion are that persuasion is symbolic, utilizing words, images, and sounds. It involves a deliberate attempt to influence other people. Self-persuasion is the key. People are not coerced. They are instead free to choose. Methods of transmitting persuasive messages can occur in a variety of different ways, including verbally and non-verbally, via television, radio, internet, or face-to-face communication. Persuasion is presenting a case in such a way as to sway the opinion of others, make people believe certain information, or motivate a decision. Marketing programs can formally teach persuasion techniques. Social influence is having a vision of the optimum outcome for a situation or organization, and then, without using force or coercion, motivating people to work together toward making the vision a reality. Persuasion can be used to spur someone to action or to make a decision without actually earning their sincere buy-in. With influence, dedicating time to win someone's heart or earn mindshare is a prerequisite to the process of inspiring them to take action or make a particular decision. People tend to be more likely to agree to a difficult request if they have first agreed to an easy one. This is known as the foot in the door technique. This technique succeeds owing to a basic human reality that social scientists call successive approximations. Essentially, the more a subject goes along with small requests or commitments, the more likely that subject is to continue in a desired direction of attitude or behavioral change and feel obligated to go along with larger requests. The foot in the door technique works by first getting a small yes and then getting an even bigger yes. For example, Jill is more likely to let an acquaintance borrow her laptop for a day if she first is persuaded to let her friend borrow her textbook for the day. Milgram's research on obedience suggests that obeying destructive commands is more the rule than the exception. 66% of participants obeyed the instructions of the experimenter throughout the experiment, despite purported harm to their partners and considerable emotional distress on their own parts. Similar findings obtained in different outcomes and countries in different settings and with different subject pools, leading to the conclusion that the situation, not some aberrant feature of the participants, was the direct cause of the results. Some situational features did affect obedience rates, such as whether the Confederate experimenter was labeled a researcher or was just an ordinary person, the psychological distance from the experimenter, the psychological distance from the victim, and the presence of Confederates modeling defiance. Orders to inflict psychological harm on victims is also likely to be obeyed. When the administered harm was psychological rather than physical, the majority of the participants still obeyed experimental instructions to continue inflicting harm. Observing others defy authority figures significantly reduces obedience. In groups where some people model disobedience, defiance is way more common. Ash's line judgment research analyzed conformity to a unanimous majority. When asked to judge line length alone, subjects were very accurate, 95% of the time. But when Confederates made an obviously incorrect judgment, subjects tended to comply, 75% of the time. For example, if you were alone and were asked, which of the lines on the left most closely matches line D on the right, you would most likely say A, which is correct. However, if you're in a group of 10 and all agreed that the correct answer was C, you would most likely go against what you feel is the correct answer. Faced with the choice of admitting compliance with group standards and proving that agreement with the standard was forced by the facts, almost everyone attempts to reconstruct the facts.